Hello, you are welcome to Maths Clinic Series. In this video, we are continuing the series of trigonometry, and this is video number 5. And here we are looking at angles and quadrants. By the end of this video, you should be able to identify ratios and the quadrant at which they become either positive or negative. Then also explain the meaning of negative angles. I want you to pause this video for a moment and then pick any value between 0 and 90 and find the sine, cosine, and the tangent of the value and record your answer. When you are done, pick it from 90 to 180, 180 to 270, 270 to 360, and each of them pick any value and find the value in terms of it positive and negative. You observe something we are going to look at very soon. Now, when we have a circle, we all know that when you divide a circle into 4 equal parts, we create what we call quadrants, and this was done in plane geometry. And so I can have quadrants like this. Quadrant simply means an area of a circle bounded by 2 radii where the central angle is 90 degrees. So if here is 90 degrees, then it means the whole of this area becomes a quadrant, and we can have 4 quadrants in a circle. All right, so we are talking about angles and quadrants, and quadrant simply means area of a circle bounded by 2 radii where the 2 radii meet at an angle of 90, or the central angle to that sector is 90 degrees. And so here we will call this our first quadrant, call second quadrant, third quadrant, and the fourth quadrant. Remember, this naming is fixed everywhere. You can't decide here to be your first quadrant. It's always first quadrant, second quadrant, third quadrant, and fourth quadrant. Anywhere you go in Ghana, outside Ghana, this is how we name the quadrants. Let me quickly use Geogebra to explain this further. So when we are talking about is that we have quadrants here, first quadrant, second, third, fourth. First quadrant is a quadrant where we have our angles lying between 0 and 90. And so right from 0 up to 90 is our first quadrant. And let's pick any value between 0 and 90, like 40 degrees. Now 40 degrees, if you use calculator for sine of 40, you see that the result will be 0.642 that. The same thing for tan 40 will give you this. Cos 40 will give you this. Realize that all these answers, the tan, the cos, and then the sine, they all give you positive. Let's pick another value within the same range. Let's say 75 degrees. Sine 75 degrees is positive, tan 75 degrees is positive, and cos 75 is positive. It means this is true for all values that are within the first quadrant. So you can see that is true. All right. Now, let's come to the second quadrant. The moment we hit the second quadrant, like 95 degrees, which is obtuse angle for now. The first one is acute angle. This is obtuse angle. You realize that in the second quadrant, sine is positive, tan is negative, cos is negative. Let's pick any value again in the same second quadrant, like 165. Again, we can see only sine being positive, tan is negative, cos is negative. What it means is that in the first quadrant, all the ratios are positive. With the second quadrant, only sine is positive. That is very important to take note of. Now let's go to the third quadrant. Once we enter the third quadrant, that is angles that are more than 180 but less than 270. So here we have 200, and 200 sine is negative, only tan is positive, cos is negative. And any value again within the same quadrant, like example 250 degrees, sine is still negative, tan is positive, and cos is negative. So it means that any value ranges from 180 and 270, between 180 and 270, you see tan being positive, sine and cos is negative. Now let's go to the final quadrant. like quadrant 4 or fourth quadrant. Here we pick example like 300 degrees. Cos is positive, negative for tan, negative for sine, and that also be the same if I pick 350 degrees. Again, cos is positive, sine and tan are negative. So this explains how quadrant works. So any value that we pick in first quadrant, all our signs are positive. In second quadrant, you know what happens. Third and fourth, what happens. So we are going to apply this in our next video to solve questions. All right. So this is a summary of what we've just studied. All for first quadrant, only sine is positive for second quadrant, only tan is positive for third quadrant, and only cos is positive for fourth quadrant. So let's quickly look at negative angles to end this section of the video. Negative angles. Ideally, we can't have angles to be negative, because if you measure something, let's say you measure a space between these two, I mean, how would you measure a space between two lines and say the angle is negative? Or you look at your arm this way and you say negative measured. But then we still have negative angles. And why do we get negative angles? Negative angle is a way of measuring an angle from the x-axis clockwise. Remember, we started with this course by saying that angles in trigonometry are measured from x-axis anti-clockwise. So when we have negative angles, we are saying that when we try to measure this angle in a clockwise direction, then we create negative angles. So anytime you have negative of a particular angle, let's say negative 60 degrees, it simply tells you that the angle was measured backwards or in clockwise direction from the x-axis. That is all about negative angles. So we can see here angles measured positive direction. So we have 135, and here we can see positive, here we can see positive. Then let's look at the negative. From 0 here up to that, we can see negative 150. All right, and we can also see negative angle, negative 240 degrees, and so on and so forth. So what have you learned so far in this video? You can pause the video and answer the following questions. In which quadrant is the cosine of an angle positive? All right. So for us to see cosine of an angle being positive, if you look at it here, the question says which quadrant gives us cosine of an angle positive, and that is fourth quadrant, because fourth quadrant we have cos of any angle positive. In which quadrant is the tangent of an angle being positive, and that is third quadrant. The angle 471 degrees will fall in which quadrant? That is strange, right? Because we know angles always comes with 360 degrees. We can go beyond 360. That is why we can have an angle of 540 for pentagon, 720 for hexagon, and so on and so forth. That's interior angles of polygons. So if we have talking about 471, then 471 will start from, so to start from 0 up to 360, then we go to 1 revolution, then we continue again. We need 101 to add up to give us the 471, so we continue again, we hit 90, we hit this one, so 471 will be in this quadrant. All right, because we are talking about 471. So after the complete revolution, we get 360, then we continue until we get 471, and 471, it will end in second quadrant, which is sine. So when the question is telling you that the angle 471 will fall in which quadrant, it will fall in the second quadrant. Then what about 540? You can try your hand on that. All right, 542, that will also start from here. We go continuously, then we come to 1 revolution, 360. So when I take 360 out of 540, I'll be left with 180, and that means I'll continue until I get up to 180. and 180 is not in any quadrant, so you can say it is in sine at the same time tan quadrant. So we see 180, so it means 540 will not be in any quadrant, or we can say it's between sine and tan. Yeah, with this we come to the end of video number 5. Watch out for video number 6, where we dive deep into special angles.